On behalf of the Professional Baseball Strength and Conditioning Coaches Society, I'd like to welcome you to the PBSCCS Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Messina.
Yeah, it almost seems like the eye test is always the first, as soon as a guy walks into camp and the manager sees him or one of the coaches sees him, like, this guy looks terrible, dude. And you're like, you just wrote off like his whole offseason. Like, what if he comes in the cage and he just absolutely rakes and he's just a little heavy right now and he's going to run himself into shape? Or the other, like, this guy put on 10 pounds, 15 pounds, or, the infamous, he put 20 pounds of muscle on in the offseason. And you're like, did he? And then they're like, yeah, he looks jacked. He looks great. And then he goes and he hits like 085 and they're like, but he looks great. It's going to come. And it's like, it's almost always that eye test, right? When they first walk in. And then, you get a week into camp, you get 2 weeks into camp, guys kind of settle in. And then it starts becoming like, yes, his swing looks really good in the cage, or he looks a little slow defensively, or that's when those conversations kind of come in. But it's almost always like, as soon as the guy walks in, somebody comes to you and is like, this dude's up 10 pounds, don't mess him up. Or this dude's up 10 pounds, but they're not good, you better get him into shape. You know what I mean? It's like, it's just a flip of the coin with guys. Or a guy could come in exactly the same and they'll be like, he looks way different this year. And you're like, no, he looks exactly the same. So it was always kind of funny to me, just like, and that's the thing, is like that first impression when a guy walks in is so, it really sets the tone for the rest of the camp, for the rest of, really the season. Sometimes guys get it held against them all the time, especially in big markets, big media markets. They love to just eat up when guys report. But yeah, for us, I was always like, I kind of want to judge at the beginning, but also like I need to see more of the skill work. And that's the other thing, is like guys show up. A lot of them have either been driving for 12 plus hours, or they've been flying, or they're moving their family across the country. Like, I had tons of times where I would train guys here in Arizona in the off season when I was in the minor leagues. They'd be in great running shape, whatever. And then as soon as we'd go to Florida and that humidity would hit, it was just game over for them. And all of their conditioning got worse. They felt like they couldn't breathe. And then after like 2 weeks, they kind of got their legs underneath them. And the coaches are like, hey, you did a great job. But at the beginning, it was like, hey, this guy doesn't look as good as we thought. And then 2 weeks later, they're like, you did a great job with this guy in the offseason. Say, pump the brakes a little. I think it's just kind of a baseball thing in general, right? It's very, very like reactive. It's very like today. It's like, let's play the long game a little bit. But we've kind of touched on just, guys building up through camp. So what does it look like when you're preparing guys for the demands of the season, right? Like in spring training, you're playing a lot of day games. During the season, you're playing a lot of night games. Spring training, you're playing maybe 3 to 4 times a week. You're building up your innings. During the season, you're playing 9 innings every day, all the time. Like, how are you guys kind of managing, the sexy term, right, is like the workload management. Like, how are you guys managing that? Is that more of falling on sports science, the coaching staff, you guys, kind of a collaborative effort? Like, what does that look like to just prepare them for the season as we get towards the second half of spring training here?
Yeah, I think the important part, like a little bit back to what I was talking about before, just communicating with guys and seeing how they come in, kind of a mix of objective and subjective data. We could be going 2 to 3 weeks in a row without a break. So knowing when to give guys a break on our end, especially because they're going to keep practicing, they're going to keep playing, they're not taking that away. So we've got to get out of their way sometimes. And okay, if we maybe not do the lift today, maybe not the whole volume we were going to do, or maybe we push the lift to tomorrow, or there's a lot of different things we can do to kind of manage that workload as spring training goes on to keep guys fresh. And I think looking at the objective data too, like I know the plates give us a jump height number every day that we don't jump them every day, but seeing that over time, if that's going down, that's a good workload fatigue monitor in my mind. And those are the ways we kind of monitor that.
Yeah, I agree with that that commentary there. I think there are a lot of things that go into it, if I'm being honest. I mean, obviously, we there's been a I feel like a pretty decent push recently to make spring training a bit more representative of the demands of what the season actually entails. Now, obviously, we can't make it representative as it relates to travel, as it relates to the lack thereof, or I should say the lack of good dietary options and um, family stresses and people being all over the place in different time zones in different cities. Like we can't replicate um, those specifics. However, like as it relates to practice design, right? Like do the workouts that they're doing on field look somewhat similar to what it is they're going to be doing pregame, BP, side sessions? Like, do those things start to look a bit more representative of the season as we get closer? And I think specific to maybe our jobs, I think we definitely are managers of workload. And I don't know that that necessarily means always reducing, or I just think it means that we have to have an awareness around what it is they're doing holistically, not just what we're asking them to do, not just what so and so or the athletic training staff is asking them to do medically. I think it's having an awareness around their total body of work. Are the catchers getting extra work in because those guys always seem to get run straight into the ground early in camp when they have X amount of bullpens to catch, and then there's a live BP, and then they need to back up in major league camp. I don't know, like how do we prescribe running volumes around that, right? Like we know that maybe an acute chronic model is telling us we need to run X distance at X intensities for X amount of reps. Are we able to demonstrate some like willingness or ability to negotiate with some of like what our standards are at times? Not lessening the standard, but like having that adaptability component to that. And I think that that happens through conversation. It happens through trust across disciplines within our organization, trust in the player. So I think that there are a lot of components. We could probably talk exclusively on this, but I do feel like that just making spring training, if I had to bucket this, umbrella this concept, it would be making this as representative as possible as we make our way towards the end of camp. Maybe that means in sprinkling some afternoon, evening games as opposed to a 6 a.m. arrival and a 10 a.m. or a 1 a.m. first pitch. Maybe it turns into a 3 or 4 or 6 p.m. first pitch the last week of camp. Maybe it means that there are 4 fields that are operating as an affiliate, quite literally separate from one another, and the manager, whoever the on-field staff is basically running the operation in a similar fashion as they would at the affiliate. Maybe it means that there are lifting groups that are specific to an affiliate, and that coach has the freedom and the luxury to be able to coach up players that are likely to be with him or her when we do break for the affiliate. So I think there's different ways to do this, but I do believe in making this thing look as similar to what it's going to look like when we're actually playing competitive games. We're tasked with winning a game every night as we also continuously develop throughout the course of the season. That's probably where we get our bang for our buck there.
Yeah, I would agree with you both 100%. Just on monitoring workload and then also like trying to make it a little bit more representative. It was always like a tough one for us because there were days where like if the pitchers weren't going to pitch in the game, they'd go home early, right? Like they'd show up, they'd get their workout, they'd get their conditioning, they would do PFP, and then they're gone by like 11 a.m. And we were like, during the season, they're never going to be able to leave early. But at the same time, like we do want them to be able to enjoy a little bit of family time or a little bit of sun, the beach, whatever, because once the season starts, like there's very minimal of that. Right. And so it was kind of a hard thing to fight for because you're taking away some of the good things in a guy's life. Right. To prepare them for basically that shitty schedule that's approaching. But at the same time, during the season, like the minimal amount of hours that you'll spend at a field on a day could easily be 8 hours every single day. Right. And then you look at spring training and it's like, how many days are guys even at the ballpark for 8 hours? It's probably not as many as you'd think, because especially early on in camp, if they play an inning or 2 innings or 3 innings, like they leave after, right? So by the time you get to the end of camp, maybe you're getting some long days for the players. The staff is always there a long time. It doesn't matter. The staff is always going to be there. but you're trying to build the players up just to be there long enough and to be able to lock in, right? Because during the season, some guys will show up at noon for a 7 o'clock game. There's waves during the day where they have to lock in on a meeting, then they check out at their locker and they eat lunch. Then they lock in for a workout, then they check out. Then they lock in and they check out. And then by the time they get to the game, they got to lock in. Like that in itself is something that is hard to replicate in spring. And then again, Logan, you talk about the travel, you talk about the food, you talk about playing in front of big crowds, you talk about playing night games versus day games. Like there's so many factors that go into it that I don't think you're ever going to get a perfect spring training. I think that's really unrealistic, but we could probably move the needle closer so that it's not as big of a spike once you get to the season. It's always going to be a big spike once you get to opening day. You're playing in front of the crowd, the adrenaline's pumping, the games really matter, the stats matter. But I think there's little ways that we can make it a little bit closer. And after I left, there was conversation of even just having like nights where they would bring the guys to Top Golf, like just to get them to get back engaged at nighttime, just to kind of be on their feet more, just to interact with each other more, just to spend more time together. And again, it's a super big divide of like, dude, I really need to spend time with my family before I get fully invested in this, or like, hey, we need to be fully invested now so that when the season comes, it doesn't punch us in the face and we fall 5 games behind in the first 2 weeks of the season. So I don't know if there's a right or a wrong, probably not, but there are probably little things that can make a big difference in the long run. So especially early on in the season, like you have a lot of injuries in spring training, guys are really excited in April. And then once May hits, like they kind of get punched in the face again, there's more injuries. And then they kind of get their feet under, they go June, July, you have the All-Star break, and then it's just sprint to the finish. But yeah, I don't know. It's always kind of just been in the back of my mind, like, how do we make spring training better? Or is it just, it is what it is? I'm not sure. But, you know, it kind of leads me to maybe my next and maybe our final talking point here is just the good, the bad, the ugly of spring training. Like we've talked about it almost an hour now. Like, what do you guys really like and look forward to? What do you guys absolutely dread? And then just anything else that we've really missed.
Yeah, I think my favorite part about spring training would be being together with our full staff. You know, we're lucky enough to have a really tight strength group, and it's one of the only times a year we're all together. So a lot of sharing of new ideas, a lot of laughs, a lot of fun, a lot of time in the building, obviously. But having that group of guys all in the building and gals and all the people we got, trainers, strength coaches, everyone in the same building is a lot of fun, and it's a cool experience to have. And then I want to highlight like, one of my favorite days in particular is when those guys come in for the first time and everyone's, you know, excited to see each other, and the players specifically I'm talking about, they come in for their screens and they let you know what they were doing in the off season. Like it's a lot of excitement, a lot of hope for the upcoming year. That's one of the best times of spring training and something I look forward to every year. The least, I think just kind of what you were talking about, it is a lot of time in the building, and like Logan was saying, the staff is going to be here all day throughout the duration of spring training. So I would wager it's our most demanding time of year. So a lot less time with the family on our end, and like you were saying before, Chris, not a whole lot of free time. So just trying to balance, for lack of a better term, those two things together and get through this time of year, but still be able to enjoy it and be present throughout the day. It's tough. But that's probably the hardest and least favorite part of it.
Yeah, that's good, Joe. I think for me, I will say that, like, as I mentioned, like I think when we first got started, like my outlook on this does tend to be a little bit different now than maybe when I first got going. Obviously, I mean, as you go year after year, you start to maybe appreciate different things and start to nitpick at different ideas that you used to not even know anything about. And so I think that probably my favorite part of spring training is got to be also what Joe said in terms of there's an opportunity that exists, we'll call it, within these 6 to 8 weeks, however that, I mean, obviously there are staff that are here much, much longer and get a head start. And then there's ones that maybe don't show up until March gets underway, but there's an opportunity that exists this time of year that doesn't exist any other time. And it's the face-to-face interaction. It's the crossover amongst departments. It's the ease of conversation. It's the gatherings for dinners and such, and activities outside of the walls of the facility, as most of us are spending far more time with one another on an annual basis than our families. But definitely during spring training, we spend far, far, far more time working, or at least separated from those that we spend time with at home, than we do any other time of the year. And I think while that's worth acknowledging, it's also worth acknowledging that there's the opportunity to develop relationships that may be difficult to develop from a distance. And I think if we're not taking full advantage and leveraging the exposure that we have this time of year, that's on us, right? Like if we're not able to develop at a bare minimum, the working relationships that need to be very, very strong. And ideally, Joe, you touched on like some of these people are our best friends, right? Like we've developed friendships that extend far beyond what it is that we're doing at work, and that we care deeply about. And I think that like that just wouldn't exist without this time of year, right? And it wouldn't exist without this line of work that we basically signed up for. So that's my favorite part about, I think, this thing of professional baseball, and more specifically to spring training. I'll say that like probably my least favorite part, aside from like the days get long, right? I ironically do feel like that probably tends to become less of a concern, like maybe the longer you do it, because then it just becomes normal. I will say that the sheer volume of people, and I'm outgoing and I'm extroverted, right? But the sheer volume of people that are within the walls, the amount of conversation, the depth of the conversation, the amount of interaction with the players that, oh, by the way, all needs to be intentful and purposeful, right? Like we shouldn't waste the opportunity that we have to have those conversations. I feel like that tends to take a toll towards the back end of camp, right? Like if you're not careful, you tend to be a little worn out. You tend to drag ass just a touch. You tend to like drink 4 or 5 extra cups of coffee on the front end to make sure that you're like accounted for on the back. And I think that so that's probably my least favorite part, is just like the sheer numbers of everything that are going on. And I think it's just, for me, I care a lot about like influence and how, and the magnitude of influence that I can have. And I feel like at times when you pollute the operation by literally just having so many people in such a small space, like sometimes I feel like the quality of maybe what goes on, it just deteriorates. And it's no fault of anyone in particular. It's just the sheer like coach to athlete ratio, or staff to athlete ratio, or on field to front office ratio, like whatever that is. There are a lot of distractions in spring training as well. So I do feel like that's probably my least favorite part, is just like, I feel like it's easier to have maybe a quality, well-run operation with like maybe a smaller group of people, albeit I do really appreciate the opportunity to connect with a grander number of people during camp.
Yeah, speaking from my own experience, obviously I'm out now. Just kind of thinking on this episode before we really got into it, it's like, I really miss spending time in the office after the day is over with my closest friends on the strength staff, particularly the head strength coach with Boston at the time, Kiyoshi Momose. He was just honestly one of my best friends in life. He was like a father to me. And we spent so much time together, and we had such a good relationship that when the day was over, we'd just sit in the office and just talk about anything. And we'd look up and it'd be like 8 p.m. and be like, all right, we got to go home, go to bed, and get ready to do it all again the next day. And, those connections will last a lifetime. And I do really miss that. On the flip side of that, to your point, Logan, there are a ton of people, and there's also a lot of turnover in the game right now. So you're always meeting new people. And it's like, I just met you yesterday and dude, I forgot your name. I'm really sorry. Or you're like 10 days into camp and you've talked to somebody every day and it's too far gone for you to be like, I totally forgot that person's name. But it's just, there are just so many people. And again, everybody, especially early on in camp, is so gung-ho and so excited for the upcoming season that everybody's just trying to make a positive impact, and it becomes a lot. And I was in the same boat as you guys. I just wanted to be really impactful. I wanted to have a positive influence on all of the players. And so I was workaholic. I was just there all the time. And I think if I could go back in time, I would take time to really, one, to meditate and just spend some quiet time with myself, and two, to take time to really show some gratitude and just be where I was at, because I was always just like, all right, we got to get ready. 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 We got to do this. We got to do that. And I was just kind of constantly spinning the wheels, where I never was really taking a moment to just sit back and be like, this is awesome. Like, this is part of a bigger thing, something that's much bigger than me. Especially for me, being in Boston is such a historic organization that's like, when we leave and we go to Fenway Park, like, it's Fenway Park. Like, it's an amazing place to be. It's an amazing organization to be a part of. And I think sometimes that just sped up on me for the sake of like trying to be a positive influence to everyone. And I wasn't really taking care of myself. And Joe, to your point, early on in this conversation, it's like taking that self-care really does matter. And the other thing that I really loved about spring training is like, you have the same facility every day. It's the same meal times every day. It's the same schedule. So somebody who's very routine oriented, it's like the perfect time of year to just schedule your life in blocks. It becomes Groundhog Day and you're like, all right, same schedule over again. But if you can master that schedule, it really does help you. And I think for me, I would probably have just scheduled a little bit more like quiet, alone, meditative time for myself, so that, Logan, to your point, by the end, I wasn't just a full-on asshole that nobody wanted to talk to. Because every year it'd be like, we'd have new interns, new staff, whatever. I'm like, listen, everybody's gonna be really excited early on in camp. You're going to think you love everybody. And then with a week left, you're going to see everybody's dark side. Don't judge them on that week, because that's not really who they are. They're just really sleep deprived or over caffeinated or just over it. So yeah, I think we've done a good job of kind of painting the picture of spring training. And before we sign off and I take any more of your free time, just, is there anything that we missed that you want to kind of, send us home with?
I just want to build on something you just said, Chris, real quick before we hop off here. I think
Sure.
it's funny that you said that if you had to do it over again, or if you could go back, which really resonated with me now that you're not with a club, that you would take the time to like really maybe just like sit and quiet, like be intentional about that, because it's that, and it resonated with me because that's the polar opposite of like anything that we get around here, right? Like trying to find a room or I mean, anywhere in this place that you won't hear noise, or that someone won't be starting the conversation, or that someone's phone won't be ringing, like it's impossible. And I think that the irony of that really resonated with me. And I agree. I think that like really thinking about like, hey, like they're looking from a grander scale, right? Like this isn't going to last forever, right? For any of us. It far extends beyond anything that like we bring to the table and any impact that we can have. Like this is a much more robust and grander scale operation than we could probably even imagine. Also from a business standpoint. So I feel like that just like looking around and being, like expressing some gratitude of the fact that we can even play a small role in a grander scale operation within the organization. And then we have an opportunity to impact the direction of the organization is pretty cool, right? Like there are people everywhere that would kill to have the opportunity that we have and have had to work in Major League Baseball, right? And to be able to work at what at least would be externally viewed as the like pinnacle of performance within baseball. I think that a lot of the times, and I'll put myself in this too, like it's taken for granted, right? Like we're sitting over here complaining about the length of the day or this player that doesn't seem to be able to buy in. And I think that like the more that we can kind of like ground ourselves and step back and be like, you know what? Like these are like first world problems that we have, and they're not really like, this is like kind of fake. You know what I mean? Like it's just kind of a fairy tale that we're showing up and doing this to begin with, and having like a really like strong appreciation for that. has been an emphasis of mine that I've also done a poor job with. So your comment, I think, really resonated with me of like, I'm like looking around this room right here with like, there's pictures all over the wall of like the history of the Chicago White Sox. And now I'm thinking like, maybe I should take a second to like really appreciate that and realize that like, because of that, I'm able to show up here and do a good job today, do the same thing tomorrow, do the same thing the next day, and we'll see where that takes us. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a great. Go ahead. Sorry, Chris.
No. I'm just, yeah. I just, like I said, for me, having been out now for a year plus, like it just, there are many things that I don't miss. And I'm very, very, very happy in the life I have now. But again, I think if I was to get back in, I would just have a different perspective of things. And that would be a major point for me, is just being a little more grounded, having a little more gratitude, and just really appreciating the fact that you get to do something that's fucking awesome for a job. You know what I mean? Even if the days are long, even if the staff and the players drive you nuts, like at the end of the day, it's a really cool thing that you guys get to do. So.
Yeah, I think those are great points from both of you guys. And hearing you talk about the previous question, I just think a closing point or takeaway for me is something important for any strength coach, your social battery. I think most of us are pretty outgoing and like to coach and be on the floor and talk to people and have conversations. And you could feel how that wears on you at this time of year. And that's definitely one of the hardest parts of this time of year. So to tie all that in, like practicing gratitude, being present, meditating, doing all those things to take care of yourself. Because if you can't take care of yourself, you're not going to best be able to serve the people around you. So being mindful of that this time of year, I think, and any time of year, is something that I think we miss on a lot, and it's good to be reminded of.
For sure. Logan, any final closing thoughts, arguments, anything before we kick it off here?
No, man, I'm good. I feel I'm pretty happy with the direction this has gone in. Just appreciate you, Chris, for, taking the initiative to like put this together. Hopefully someone can be of benefit to this, or maybe generate some interest, right, from someone who previously wasn't interested. So I think I appreciate your willingness to continue on with the podcast, even after you've chosen to leave the game, at least for the time being. I think that this serves a grander audience and maybe we even realize. And I've noticed that as well through conversation, not necessarily within professional baseball, but as I attend NSCA events or go to something that's not even related to strength and conditioning. It's like, hey, I saw you on that, or I listened to this, or hey, I listened to that. Do you know that guy? Like, yeah, that's one of my buddies. He works for the Rangers or whatever, right? So I think this influence and impact probably extends beyond like maybe what we even know. So I appreciate your willingness to continue on with this thing, because it would have been easy to say, I need to step away. And you didn't do that. So commendable on your part. So I appreciate you.
Trying to impact the game, man, even if I'm not in, just doing it from other angles. So guys, I appreciate your time. I genuinely appreciate your time, especially being in spring training. I know you guys don't have a ton of the free time, so it's always good to catch up with both of you. I appreciate all the insights. Best of luck this year, and we'll be in touch soon.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate you.
All right, everybody, that's going to conclude part 2 of this 2-part interview with Joe and Logan. I hope you enjoyed both parts of this interview. I think we did a great job of just pulling back the curtain on what makes spring training. It's such a unique and important part of the game of professional baseball. And I think we did a really good job of just going into all the details of preparing players for the long and grueling regular season of professional baseball, taking care of yourself in the chaotic time that is spring training, and really just making the most of those 6 to 8 weeks that you have with everybody in the organization. 3 things that I took from the guys in this part of the episode: managing workload does not always mean reducing or taking things away. Spring training is a valuable time to foster meaningful relationships with a number of people in your organization, and taking advantage of opportunities to take care of yourself will help you to be at your best when it's time to take care of others. With that being said, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and we'll talk to you again on the next one.